Hi there, my name is David Batshoffen and I host a travel blog called Travel and Things. Currently, I'm a non-travel travel writer. So what I'm doing is a series of In Conversations With. And it's both people from the travel industry and also from the entertainment industry. And tonight we have well-known heart specialist from Cape Town, Nik Rabinowitz, who also doubles as a stand-up comedian. Nik, you're not my mom, but thanks for joining us.
I'm not your mom, Dave. Thanks for having me. I am somewhat of a cardiac specialist, having had a father who had a chronic heart condition, and one of his best friends was an internationally renowned cardiologist by the name of Professor Lionel Opie, who kept him alive for another 15 years.
Wow.
And I recently also came off blood thinners because I also have high cholesterol. It runs in the family, Dave.
Should we start comparing blood thinners? I'll tell you what.
Yeah, let's.
What I'm on.
What have you been on? What are you on? What are you on?
I wasn't on warfarin because warfarin kills rats. I'm on something that starts with a Z. I can never remember it.
I actually was talking about this, and then a man came up to me in Joburg at the Savoy, at the Capri in Savoy.
Yeah.
Sorry. And he said, "No, you must be very careful about the statins. The side effects of the statins." He must have been probably mid-70s, and I was taking a statin at the time. And I said, "Well, what have you been your side effects?" And he said, "No, I've had 12 car accidents in the last 3 months." And he then proceeded to describe all of them. He said, they were all before 9 o'clock in the morning, and half of them actually I crashed into my own gate, and then the last one was on Louis Boerta. Actually crashed into the back of a taxi. And I was like, did they do tests? I mean, what? He said, "No, I've always been a bad driver, so I just assumed it was that." And then anyway, I got out to inspect the damage on the taxi, and I fell asleep on the pavement on Louis Boerta. And his daughter was next to him going, "Yes, that's true. We found him on the pavement. He was fast asleep on the pavement." And then he said, I said, like, "Well, what did the tests show that they did?" And he said, "No, they didn't. The tests, there were no conclusive results at all. Eventually, I self-diagnosed." It's like, "And what was your diagnosis?" He says, "No, well, I was, I was actually taking my hypertensives last thing at night and my sleeping pills first thing in the morning. That's what happened."
Oh, Nik, what would we do? I always just thought the statins were bad people, or they were part of an island in New York, or just off New York.
They are, yeah. That's what my cardiologist liked to say. He says most people don't know statins from Staten Island.
Exactly.
I'm interested in the travel. So I have a bit of a travel fantasy myself, which is that because it looks like my kid's school is going to close down at the end of the year.
You're talking about
they just told us.
now.
Yeah, they just told us on Friday. They sent an email out to say the school's going to close. So my wife's desperately looking around for other options, but I'm thinking, why don't we go travel in the Corona period? Do you think that's going to be feasible?
I don't know. I've been talking to a lot of people. Everybody's sort of waiting for the big opening. I don't know if there's going to be reviews afterwards, but the big opening is supposedly September, October. That's what everybody's working towards. Somebody I spoke to earlier today, they're taking bookings from August. But I still don't know. Certainly not international travel, Nik. I don't think that's going to be for a while yet. Getting on a plane, I think, is going to be... What you should do is buy a camper van, put your kids and then travel South Africa. And I mean, I know you were homeschooling.
Yeah.
So you just take that onto the road.
That's what I was thinking.
Rabinowitz in Paarl.
Have you heard of this van life, the movement called van life?
No.
Okay, well, if you go onto Instagram or the internet or whatever, and you put in van life, one word, you will find all these people who, I mean, it was a thing in the 70s with your VW Combi, which but now it's become a whole thing where they turn it into this, traveling dream, and they post.
Okay.
pictures of themselves in exotic locations. So this is my actual fantasy: is to take my, refurb one of those and then take my wife and kids somewhere
No, you want
exotic, and then
you don't want to
basically
get a
leave them
small.
there.
You don't want to
I'm
get a
going to
small
leave them there.
VW, Nick. You want to get a huge Winnebago so that if there is an argument, you can send the kids to their room, which is at the other end of the vehicle, and you can't find them for a week. You know,
or a police car. Great between us and them.
Nick, did you always want to do stand-up, or did you start off as something else?
No, I never wanted to do stand-up. It was never even something I thought about at all.
Oh, okay. So what did you want to be?
I don't think I ever really got that clear for myself.
Okay.
I don't ever recall thinking I want to be that up until I was doing stand-up. I mean, even when I started doing it, I was like, I'll just give this thing a try. I don't think I have jokes about, I wanted to become a rugby player or a blah, blah, blah. But there was never like a thing. I mean, I was exposed to humor from a young age because my godfather was a guy called Percy Seif, who was an actor and a radio personality. And
I remember him well.
Was a very, very skilled storyteller, joke teller. In fact, up on my wall, I've got one of his. He was the first person to take Herman Charles Bosman to the stage.
Okay.
And so he had a lot of those kinds of stories which he would tell. A lot of them were in Afrikaans, which was his home language, his first language. And because he grew up on the West Coast as a Boerejood. And I had a notebook where I would write his jokes down and then memorize them and regurgitate them to my friends who didn't understand what I was talking about.
I still don't understand West Coast Afrikaans. En I speak Afrikaans.
Ja, dat is niet helemaal anders ding. Kijk, ons het gaat jagen. Daar was in die Kouwenbakkenveld. Ons is eintlik weet dat ons is na Makwaland. Dan was in die Ragtersveld gaan jagen. Skemers se tyd daar was Sondag dat die berge wegkruip. Toe kyk ek aan die kant ek sien die blare wat so en daar's twee groot oë van die leeu en sy spiere wat so hak. En as my twee lopende haal weer was, hy so ski sien wie agter geraak. As hy spring daar, skiet hom. Dus jy so, wow, gaan vrek op my voete en toe kak ek my broek vol.
Your comedy demographic must be quite vast, Nick. You can do English, you can do Jewish, you can do Afrikaans, you can do, is it Xhosa?
It's Xhosa, yeah.
Yeah. So your demographic is vast. You can stand at a taxi rank and have a gig or do a gig.
At a push.
Is it different though, doing it in a vernac language?
You know what, my Xhosa isn't actually good enough to do a vernac show, a full vernac show. I mean, somebody at some point said I challenge you to do that, but it would take a lot. So I'm not quite there in terms of proficiency. But I mean, yeah, it is different. You know, I was listening to a guy called Skumba, who arguably is the most popular comedian in South Africa in terms of numbers. And his vernac audience is massive. I mean, way beyond any English-speaking comic in this country. But unfortunately, he's kind of hamstrung because there isn't sufficient financial backing for vernac comedians,
right?
Even though they have the biggest followings.
Now, and traveling, do you find that I take it that you've traveled overseas?
Yeah.
And are you playing to expats or are you playing to the local audience?
Mainly to expats, but some local audience as well. But ultimately, I like to do more of that because, you know, it's kind of a challenge and an interesting thing to see what translates and what doesn't, and how to kind of bridge that gap.
Have you had that where you've done gags here in South Africa and you know you get sort of fall off chair laughter, then you do it for a different audience and there's nothing? You may as well be playing to a row of trees.
Yes, absolutely.
And then how do you come back from something like that?
Well, we call it dying. So you have a small death and a little funeral and a wake. And then you pick yourself up and you're resurrected.
You start all over again. Who do you run your material by, though, before you step up on stage?
Well, and over the last sort of how many years is it? When I started doing a radio show on 702, which was probably 2008. Gee, that's about 12 years ago. That's when I started working with someone called Gillian Breslin. And so I wrote a lot of material with her, and subsequently with a writer who's become a comedian called Gilly Apter. And so those two people I work with a lot and bounce off a lot. And then whoever's directing me, it was Brent Palmer for a long time, recently Rob van Vuuren. So it kind of goes through a writing process and then a directing process, and then we start to put it up on a stage in smaller venues and test out the material in front of actual live audiences, small audiences. And that's where the real edit happens. You see what actually works, not just in your head is funny, but in front of an audience. And that's the way most comics, a lot of comics write themselves and then, put it up, and then the audience tells you that's funny, that's not funny.
Is there any subject that Nik Rabinowitz won't touch from a comedic point of view?
I don't have many rape jokes. I don't have any rape jokes. In fact, that's a subject it's interesting.
Things like, would you joke about cancer? You mentioned your dad having heart issues.
Yeah.
Would you make jokes about heart issues?
Yeah, for sure. I've got jokes about heart issues. I've done a thing for the DL Link, which is an organization that supports cancer patients and their families for the last few years. We did that actually a couple of weeks ago. And interestingly enough, it's always the cancer patients just saying, just do some cancer jokes, just show them you've got a sense of humor. And I'm like, I can't do that joke in front of the thing. It's because the non-cancer people are going to be like, oh, you can't say that. Yep.
Do you find that? Do you find that when you do jokes that people like that cancer joke, that it's the non-cancer people that get offended and they come up to you and go, oh, do you not know that there are cancer sufferers in this room? Did you have to do that joke?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's like doing, I suppose, jokes about, I had blind people in the audience, and we've kind of bantered, myself and the blind person, and you can see other people are feeling uncomfortable about it. But there's certain things, obviously, right now I'm looking at ways to, I haven't found a way yet to talk about gender-based violence in a way that has integrity for me and is able to, I guess, point out the problems with men. I'm starting to find a way to talk about Black Lives Matter in a way that addresses this issue that a lot of white people have, where they can't get it, but all lives matter. So I'm starting to address that thing as a white person, and it's uncomfortable sometimes for white audiences. But that's kind of new territory for me, and it's a conversation that needs to happen. So probably my next show will have quite a large leaning towards that.
Yeah, you mentioned being directed, and people would go, why does a stand-up comedian need to be directed? You walk on stage, you pick up the microphone, you tell your stories, you say thank you, and you leave. Why do you need to be directed? There's nobody else on stage with you.
Yes, it's interesting because you can't see yourself. It's a little bit like trying to see your own eyeballs. You could sort of watch footage of yourself, but what a director does, or I'll just talk about this most recent show because it's very fresh in my memory, with Rob van Vuuren, was to look at all the material and say, what do you want to say, Nik? What is the foundational premise for this whole show, and how can we pull those threads together so there's a seam to this thing, so that there's a beginning, middle, and end, which I haven't really ever done properly before, but worked very powerfully because ultimately there's something I want to say.
Yeah.
and get across to the audience. And I wouldn't have seen that just doing it on my own.
Okay.
And then there's other things with rhythm and pace, and hey, let's bring it down in that middle section. Let's bring the lighting down. Let's create this intimate feel. And then you can break out of it here. Or what about this joke there? Just things that you would miss if you were just doing it on your own, which a lot of comedians, I think, now have directors for that purpose.
Do you have a favorite comedian to watch if you sort of have time? International comedian?
I've got quite a lot of favorites. I haven't managed to watch much at all over this whole period. I'm currently starting to watch a Spanish series called Money Heist.
Oh, good luck with that. I've tried. It goes on for about 20 years. Forever.
My wife's just finished the whole thing.
No. I think I made it to like season 3 or whatever it was. And they're like 9 seasons. I'm going, how can you turn this thing into, you know, the typical never-ending story? You've gone, you've robbed the bank, get out, go home, let's move on.
I've watched, actually the only stand-up I've watched recently is Dave Chappelle. I'm a big fan of Chappelle.
I do like him.
I don't know if you've watched the 27-minute show that he did a couple of weeks ago that he put out.
No, that one I've not watched. I've just finished watching Hannah Gadsby, Douglas, for the second time. She did Nanette. I think it was last year or the year before. And when you mentioned about pace and timing and lighting, she works with all of that. And it makes for a very different type of comedy show, instead of being intense and just running around the stage and sort of bouncing off things.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially with this online medium now, is if you try and string a series of unrelated things together, like a lot of stand-up shows sometimes are, it can work in a live show because people will laugh.
Yeah.
And you have laugh breaks to move between things. But here, because there's no laughter.
Yeah.
Rob and I were talking about this quite a lot, and the idea is that your segues become the thing you're relying on to link something where there's the absence of laughter. So you're delivering a punchline, and then the air is sucked out of the room. So you can't rely on that thing. You have to rely on the strength of your links and segues and premise of what you're saying.
Have you done any online stand-up gigs?
Yeah, I did. I've done a lot of things. Yeah, I've done a lot of corporate things. I've done quite a few fundraisers. I've done a bar mitzvah. I've done a 49th birthday party. I've done a quiz night. I've done 2 of my own live shows.
And what is that like when you say there's no real feedback? You may hear people laugh if you've got multiples on Zoom or in a conference setting, but there's nobody. It's just you and a camera, basically.
Yeah. Well, yeah, with a webinar format where it's just you and you can't see anybody, it's at first quite unnerving. It's kind of
because you don't know what they're doing. They could have gone out for a meal.
You have a chat feed, which is quite nice, and people will comment stuff if it's going well.
Right.
And I remember during that first show, the chat got disabled or something. So I actually didn't see any feedback for about 20 or 30 minutes or something like that. So I was kind of just, but I knew what the show was. So I knew the things were funny. And then sometimes, the fewer the number of people on a call, the more you could sort of open it up to other options and bring. So I tend to bring people on quite a lot and try and talk to people and get people to unmute themselves and find ways to connect and interact more with people than just the webinar.
Now, what does your family think about what you do? What do your children think about you? Are you cool, Dad? Do they rush off to school going, my dad is Nik Rabinowitz and he tells jokes for a living?
Well, the 3-year-old obviously doesn't know what the fuck I'm doing. The 8 and the 10-year-old, it's just normal, I guess. It's kind of normal for them.
Do you do dad jokes at home?
Occasionally, I do. My 8-year-old actually is working on his dad jokes.
Oh, is he?
He is. He's showing some promise.
Shame.
But they've got a sense of humor.
Oh, well, that's and your wife?
My wife is actually very funny. She doesn't find me funny.
Does she come to your shows? Does she come to your shows and heckle you?
She comes annually to my shows. About once or twice a year. If it's a new show, she's like, I don't want to hear those old. No. But I used to test material on her, which I learned was a terrible, terrible idea.
Did you come to that conclusion quickly, or did it take you a while, Nick?
Fairly quickly, very quickly. But for some reason, I kept doing it. You know, you do when you repeat the same thing over and over, expecting a different result.
And are you the type of comedian that gets heckled a lot? And if so, how do you deal with it?
I don't know if that's got to do with the type of comedian or the type of venues you frequent as a comedian.
We've all done that combat comedy, Nick, where you walk in and you know from minute one, they're not going to keep quiet. You're going to be fighting knives, forks, and spoons. And you may as well just go, my name is Nick. Thank you very much. Cheers.
We don't have much there's not a big heckling culture here like there would be in the UK, for example.
Yeah.
So South Africans are generally quite polite unless they're really drunk or really, I don't know, offended or they're assholes or I don't know. But it hasn't happened to me much.
Yeah.
I remember
the working men's clubs in England must be something to tackle, though.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, and I'm not great. I mean, I'm not a great crowd work. I say that, but I mean, I do enjoy doing crowd work. But like, I don't have a whole lot of anti-heckle things in my head. So when I do get heckled, it's always like a little bit of but it doesn't happen much. I kind of wish it would happen more sometimes.
You sit down at the edge of the stage and just go, would you like to talk about that? What made you say that? turn it into a session for them. And have you had incident where you've told a gag or you've gotten to almost the punchline, somebody in the room has seen that particular show before and shouts out the tagline for you?
Yeah, I'm sure that's happened a few times. Not many, but I can recall a few instances.
Do you have a favorite venue, South African venue that you enjoy going to because you know the type of crowd that you're going to get?
Yeah, I mean, I think as I've gotten sort of older and worked more, you know, there's a sort of sex appeal to like doing big venues when you've never done big theaters and big, you know, arenas and things like that. So when you play like a 3,000 or a 5,000 seater, and it's like, wow, this is sexy. But then you come to realize that comedy, there's the intimacy of a small room with low ceilings can far outweigh the sexiness of a giant auditorium. The things you can do, and you're up close and they can see your face, and there's an intimacy to the whole thing that I tend to enjoy more. And so there's a couple of places where I'll go and test stuff. There's a place called Cafe Rue down in Noordhoek where I test all of my new shows. There's actually a venue I performed at for the first time in Rondebosch in Cape Town, which is like a 50-seater in a kind of it's like a couple, and they prepare the food in the back, and then it's mainly for music. They have live bands, and he's got one of those old school mics that he's set up in a little booth on the side of the stage. And then before the show, he just shares thoughts and and he ponders life and well, what the fuck is going on in America? I mean, what? And the best way to say fuck you to all these people is to have a good laugh. Please welcome our next act. And you come on, and then he does it again at the end, and it's just 50 people there, and you're on a little stool, and you're right with them, and that for me is actually beautiful.
No, I was booked years ago I worked at a radio station, and the board had a board meeting, the radio station's board, which consisted, if I remember correctly, of 8 people, booked me to do their dinner. And I played to 8 people sitting around a table in a boardroom. It was a weird experience.
Wait, was this comedy?
Comedy, yeah.
I didn't know you were a stand-up comedian.
Yes, I have been known to tread the boards.
Huh. And for how long?
I did it for several years. Sort of dipped in and out. I was held hostage some years ago, and I used comedy as my therapy, basically. So I wrote 7 minutes of material, ran it by the then godfather of comedy, Mel Miller, who said to me, "You're too angry, tone it down," which I did. Got some nice laughs in the beginning.
To say that.
Yeah. And then I played all the usual venues up here. Started off at Hysterics, done Parker's, all those sort of things. Been there, done that. I had a T-shirt. I had to give it away.
But my mom was recently held hostage in her home during lockdown.
Really?
Yeah.
It's not nice. I don't know where to go with this, Nick. I don't know if you're being serious or not.
I'm being serious, but I'm still not sure that it actually happened or whether she staged it to have an excuse to move in with us. Because, Jewish grandmothers and their grandchildren, what they will do to get to spend time with them.
Asked to see the police report.
She told me the hearing was yesterday, so
that was quick. So where to for Nik now? I mean, I've been talking to other comedians, and some of them are quite stressed because they don't know what's going to happen. I know that they've opened, or they said that you can go to theatre, but then if you look at the ramifications for theatre managements of staging shows and the costs involved of sanitizing and cleaning up and all that type of thing, it actually doesn't pay them to open a venue, to fill it with a third of the people that they normally would, because they can't up the prices, and you can't fill venues. To play to one person in every 3 seats, it's not good for you guys, and it's certainly not good for management.
Yeah, it doesn't look viable.
No, which is sad.
And of course, it's the uncertainty of it. Nobody knows, and for how long, and et cetera, which I guess is across the board with all sorts of things. And so, how do we develop a powerful relationship to that uncertainty, I guess, is the question.
Which is very awkward. I think this is where a lot of people are struggling. I know I certainly am, is that uncertainty. And as I said right at the beginning of this chat, I'm a non-travel travel writer at the moment, which is really awkward because I've got to start inventing stuff. And I've just been given a radio show as well. And every week we go, like, where can you go? No, you can't go anywhere. You can go to you can go to Pretoria. Go to the union. I don't even know if the union buildings are open. And does anybody want to go there anymore? That's the question. Where do you go and what do you do? There's only so many ice creams you can eat. There's only so many McDonald's drive-ins you can go, drive-throughs you can go to.
I wanted to do this thing. I was doing a little breakfast show on Facebook where I found I wanted to cross to a foreign correspondent in various different countries and have them go to. I want you to go to the. This is something you could do maybe. Find somebody in wherever it is, Iceland. And I want you to go to one of those hot baths, and we're going to cross live to you on the show from the hot bath, and then I want you to describe and blah blah blah.
That's a cool. I was going to say that's a cool idea, but it's a hot bath, so it'd be a hot idea. It's just finding it's just finding these people at the end of the day. So do you have any gigs that were planned that may still be doable for you towards the end of the year or maybe into 2021, Nik?
I let go of all the gigs that were booked, live gigs, whatever. They went, and I don't have any attachment to them coming back. Luckily and fortunately, I've sort of developed an online show, I guess, really, and there's demand for it, and I'm kind of enjoying that right now.
Great, yeah.
And I was very stressed at the beginning of this whole period of time, and it wasn't clear. I was deeply surprised that I was able to work online. It came as a big surprise, and it's just become normal.
Yeah. So what seems to be happening, we are all becoming more and more accepting of what's going on. One final question, Nik. And I know that you're a headliner in your own right. But if I was to say to you that you could open for anybody, anywhere in the world, who would it be and why?
Sure. I probably enjoy opening. I don't know if I would enjoy opening. I probably wouldn't enjoy opening for any of the people I might be about to mention, because you're playing to their crowd and they don't know who the fuck you are, and you might likely die.
You're setting yourself up, Nik.
I might enjoy opening for Jerry Seinfeld.
Okay.
Jesus, who would I want to open for? That's a very good question.
Certainly not Louis C.K.
Maybe not Louis C.K. No.
Nik, it's been a gas talking to you. I've been in conversation with Nik Rabinowitz.
I've been meaning to ask you about that bloody thing on the wall the whole time, and
Which thing on the wall?
That animal. What is? I can't see its head.
It's a grijsbok that was gifted.
A grijsbok.
It was gifted to me. I did not shoot it.
Nee, dis 'n mooi bok. Waar was die bok geskiet?
Ek weet nie, in die hart, dink ek. Nik, thanks so much for joining me. If you've just joined us, it's too late. I've been in conversation with Nik Rabinowitz. Nik, before you go though, if people want to find your online stuff, where do they go?
They can go to my Facebook page or on Instagram. There's actually a series that I did during lockdown on my Instagram page called The Toilet Diaries. I think I did about 9 episodes where I was self-isolating from my kids in my toilet.
Nik, thanks very much. This has been
Thanks, Dave.
In Conversation with, I've been David Batsoff, and he's Nik Rabinowitz.